Alright, it's lockdown training day 2, and I also realized recently that I had not been doing a Q&A session for quite a while, so maybe it's time to do so. Right, so I don't take much time to read comments and everything, so I'm really sorry if sometimes it takes ages to for me to answer, but I try sometimes to go through a lot of them, put some answers, and also take out the few questions, kind of general questions that many of you are asking, and I'll try to answer them now. So, I did them, and first question is, why banana spreaders? Alright, so the spreaders on this boat are kind of... Alright, spoiler alert, this is going to be a highly boat geek episode. So if you don't want to hear about running backstay, autopilot, Pershing spreaders and all that jazz, I really recommend you click on the link up there somewhere. I'll put an episode with really nice blue water, nice music, nice sailing. And if you actually want boat geek stuff, then stay tuned, this one is for you. Facing a little bit aft, and this is because on this boat there is no fixed backstay. There are running backstay, and running backstay, the moment where you switch, there is a point where the mast is less sustained. So the idea behind the banana spreader is that by having them pushing the mast, it holds the mast aft, especially on the Siri boat like mine. You don't really mind the running backstay in light wind, tacking for example, or even in downwind condition when it's really light wind, because the spreaders are pushing the mast forward and avoid the mast to fall. On a prototype boat it's a bit different. It's more likely that the running backstay are going to be really important because the mast is just onto the deck, and the mast on this boat goes through the deck and onto the keel. So that's a bit the difference, and that's why the spreaders are facing aft, and also they're a little bit bent, and that's why people call them banana spreaders. And this is just so the jib can go further back, the leech of the jib can go further back and go and cover as much surface as possible, and it's not much gain, but it's about maybe 15-20 centimeters gain, and that plays a big role when racing. So yeah, that's why banana spreaders. Right, so another question is when you are trimming, I see some white thin lines, mostly with a little ball attached. I've seen these same on IMOCAs. What are they for? Well, these little things are called constrictor clutches. Constrictor because they use the constrictor effect, which is used a lot into the rope science on modern race boats. So those clutches are more efficient for racing for different reasons. First, they have a really good grip. They don't damage the cover of your lines, because the textile is what makes the block, rather than on a normal clutch. It's a piece of metal with teeth that blocks your line, and under heavy load this tends to chafe a lot the cover and end up breaking your lines. Also, they're much lighter than a normal clutch, and they also can be released under load, which is a big advantage. The cons, honestly, the only one would be that they require a little bit more maintenance, as in you need to rinse them really often, and they're also a little bit more sensible to the sun, because the cover is is Dyneema, so the UV damaged them, but it's mostly pros, and that's why many boats are starting to use these clutches instead of your regular mechanical clutch. So here you have your clutch. See, it's one piece of Dyneema, and the opening mechanism works this way. You have a piece of bungee here, and when you pull onto this white line, see, the white line removes the tension from the Dyneema, from the clutch, and see, the line can slip inside easily. When you want to close it, you just open this white line, the bungee puts the Dyneema cover under tension, and now the line cannot slip through because this is kind of doing constrictor effect around your line. You can still pull it this way, but this way is locked, and the more pressure, the more it blocks. So that's the concept. So you have all your lines here, and this one, for example, is the mainsail. See, it's under tension. This one is the spinnaker under tension. This was the spinnaker tack as well under tension, and these ones are open. So yeah, that's the constrictor clutching. Another question is, I'm interested in knowing how backstay works with such a large, almost square sail. Well, running backstay, they work as any other boat. So on this boat, as I said earlier, there is no fixed backstay. So the only thing holding the mast back are the running backstay and the Pershing spreaders. So the running backstay are pretty simple. This is the main part of my running backstay. It's into a constrictor clutch. So it goes here. That's my that's the main part of the running backstay, and then see this green one here is adjusting the fine adjustments, but the main thing is done by this one. And then you have your check stay here. There is the lower one that you are going to play with the how much you bend your mast, and this is going to have a play on the shape of your mainsail. Basically, the more you flatten your mast, the more volume you're gonna give to your mainsail, and the more power, and the more wind, the more you want to lose power, and the more you're gonna give your mast some curve. And finally, the part of the running backstay here. As you said, it's a big square on the mainsail at the top, and you want to use the running backstay, of course, that is to windward. So when you tack, it doesn't really matter. You can ease this backstay, tack, and then pick up on the other backstay. If you're into big downwind condition, it's really important to always have one running backstay under load. So normally, jibing downwind, I'm going to first jibe, let the mainsail crash into the running backstay. It's not pretty, but at least hold the mast. Then once the mainsail is crashed onto the other side, I pick up the running backstay to windward and put it under tension before I release the leeward one. That's kind of the organization of the jibe. I'm going to try to show you a jibe and how the running backstay works. Right, so for jibing, I'm going to prepare first everything, so I make sure that my working sheet is clear and ready to fly. I'm going to have my running backstay on the leeward side, future windward side that is ready to be picked up. I'm going to go deep downwind and around 150, 160 true wind angle, just to make sure that I'm depowered. So let's go for this. I'm going to try to comment as we go. So, alright, so I'm going to 50 apparent. I prepare my winch. That's my shit on the other side. And when I'm ready to go, I just go 30 degrees with the autopilot and release the working sheet straight away. Bring my spinnaker on the other side. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Blow the one more. I have a mark here, I'm to my mark. The mainsail is gonna go. Yes, no, yes. So there the mainsail, see, is into the running backstay. It's not pretty, but not big trouble. I quickly take onto the running backstay, put it under tension, and now I can release it on the leeward side. And that's it. Drive. Right, another question. How does 2 little solar panel produce enough amps to keep the autopilot running 24/7? Well, they're not that little. It's 2 times 100 watt. Basically on a sunny day I'm charging around 6 to 8 amp hour, and I'm drawing just the system lit without the autopilot on. I'm drawing about 1.5 amp to 2 amps. With the autopilot on an easy day I don't go much more above 3.5 amp, and a bit more on heavier conditions, but normally in heavier condition it's also when you're a bit more on the helm. So the charge is really not a problem on this boat. I have 2 lithium batteries, and I really don't have any issues with batteries so far. I also have a nitro generator that I've introduced already in an episode before. I'll put the link above. And finally I also have a third solar panel, just kind of as a redundancy if I have a problem with those ones. It's below deck, and I can just put it out where I want, place it where I want on the deck if I need more energy at some point. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. So it's kind of 2 questions in the same one, which is, why does it look like the tiller just locks into place? It doesn't need to keep a hold of it, but I can't see an autopilot or wind vane. Well, first, a wind vane would not work on a boat like this, because wind vane works on apparent wind, and because these boats kind of accelerate so much when go surfing, when there is a bit more breeze, a wind vane would be not really efficient, or not efficient at all. We need a pilot that is able to take into account true wind angle, and the true wind angle is calculated with the apparent wind direction and the boat speed. So you cannot see the autopilot here because the autopilot is below deck. See, it's fixed on this, and there's a quadrant inside. I'm going to show you, but I'm not holding the tiller at the moment. It's moving by itself. It's because it's the autopilot is on, and inside the perch rod is doing the job for me. Also, I've been asked a lot, and there's a question that comes into the comments a lot, is what is this blue disc here? That's the remote for the autopilot. Basically, instead of having to come here and turn on or off the autopilot and adjust it to the course, I have this remote that just does exactly the same. And the idea behind this is that I can be in the front, I can be anywhere, I can be here steering and engage the autopilot, stop it, do some adjustment. It's just a gain of time performance. And also another question that comes a lot is, does the autopilot takes into account the wind angle? So yes, the autopilot has several modes it can run into. One of them is just compass. You tell him okay, follow 270 degrees compass, and the autopilot will just follow this. This is really good. It's kind of a really good backup, but when racing, you want your sail to be adjusted all the time, so normally you set your autopilot on apparent wind angle for close hold to kind of reaching point of sail, because the wind, the boat is going to adapt the course to the trim of the sails, which is the most efficient and the fastest. But when you go downwind, especially at high speed, you want your boat to be able to steer at true wind angle. So there is a wind vane at the top of the mast that gets the apparent wind angle, and then there is the boat speed that is taken into account, and there's the computer inside the autopilot just does the calculation to have your true wind angle. This is because the difference when the boat is surfing of the apparent wind is huge. In going from, you know, kind of 12, 13 knots cruising to surf at 17, 18 knots, your apparent wind angle is just all over the place. And if you keep your autopilot onto apparent wind angle mode, the boat just does lots of zigzag, and it's dangerous because in big condition you also have waves, etc. That's why you want true wind angle to be taken into account for your autopilot. And now let me show you the installation inside. So that's my panel here, pretty easy, classic. And inside the boat, if we go a little bit down here, so here you see, so here is the perch rod, see, connected to the tiller above. Right, another question, which is really long, but blah blah blah. I always wondered how single-handed boat managed to avoid collision whilst the sailor is taking a necessary sleeping break. I know in aviation there is a system like ACAS that warns you in advance if you're getting too close to another plane. If was plane works with the system, but how does it work with sailing? So, well, just with aviation, you have a system on board sailing boats that is called AIS, which is anti-interception system, something like this, along those lines. Basically, the idea is to have your course speed that is broadcasted through radio, and the other ships do the same, and the small computer inside the AIS calculates a collision course with other vessels. It's really simple. It's just, see this small screen here? Well, now there isn't many people on the water, so can't show you anyone, but if there was another vessel in the area, it would show as a little green triangle, and basically you set up an alarm based on CPA, which is closest point of approach, meaning that if the two boats carry on with their current course and speed, at what is the closest point they're going to pass to each other, and the TCPA, which is the time to CPA, which is how far away in time you are to this point, to this CPA. And setting this, you can set an alarm that wakes you up, or that just alerts you to know if you're on a collision course with another vessel. Of course, this system only works if both boats, if all the boats are using this. More and more boats are using this. All the commercial vessels have to use AIS. More and more leisure crafts are using this, but you're never sure, and so that's why AIS does not replace good watchkeeping. It's just an assistance, and it's really useful at night or in fog when you have a hard time to determine if you're going to pass behind or in front of a vessel, especially cargo ship close to TSS and stuff like that. So that's an help to watchkeeping. I also get a lot of questions about the sails I have on this boat. So I have a main sail and the jib, which are kind of the two basic sails you'll have on any boat.
And on top of this, I have two spinnakers and two genakers. The spinnakers, they're these kind of, fluffy sails, big balloons, they're into bags like this. And I have genakers, which are also larger head sails, and they furl onto themselves. We use a furling system for that, but it means it's not a cable and with your sail furling around it. The sails furl onto its own luff, and yeah, you just have some pivot points at the top and the back and the bottom to furl them. So one thing is to have many sails, the other one is to know when to use those sails, and that's why you hear me really often talking about sails range. And my sail range basically is this. It's a table that tells you when to use which sail, and this you only learn it by trying your sails, meaning that with a certain amount of wind you go at a certain angle and you see which sail is the most efficient. And a good part of my training, and for example what I'm doing today, I have a new sail that I want to try. I'm going to try it with the wind. I mean, today there is 10 knots of wind. Don't think there is going to be much more, so I'll need to try this sail another time when there is 20 knots. And I just set the sail and see how high I can go, how low I can go, and at what speed, and then I build this table and try to have this table as accurate as possible. Because when you're cruising, you can kind of do your adjustments. When you're racing, you know that after the next mark, you're going to bear away or come up X amount of degrees. So you know what the wind will be on the next course, and you can choose the right sail. And so as soon as you pass the mark, you get this new sail up and you maximize your speed. That's all the idea behind this sales range, and that's what I'm doing today. And actually I need to go and change sail now. So here we go. See, the genaker is hoisted. It's in between the bowsprit and the top. It's furled onto itself, so I can hoist it and then I'll unfurl it as soon as I'm ready. It's a really convenient sail compared to a spinnaker, for example. And yeah, just maximize speed. The idea is always to maximize speed depending on your point of sail. So for example, my big genaker would be good around 100 degrees from the true wind angle at about kind of 10 knots, bearing away if the wind increases, coming up if the wind decreases. That's kind of the idea. So now you see, for example, I just dropped the spinnaker to put on the genaker, and the spinnaker is a big mess here. I need to put it back into its bag properly so it doesn't have any twist in it. The idea behind the genaker is to have a sail that is furled on itself, so easier to send and drop. And also the kind of the philosophy behind this sail is that you can have it ready, eventually hoisted there in place, but still furl, and when you need it at a mark, for example, you can unfurl it and then drop your spinnaker behind or stuff like that. But yeah, it's just more convenient way of storing a sail, and also the material doesn't really like to be crunched too much, and that's why the difference with this big mass of a spinnaker is. So one of the checks I wanted to do today was to see if my small Gennaker in combination with my jib is more or less efficient than my new big Gennaker, and if yes, at which point of sale, etc. Let's try this. Another question I'm getting a lot is about the 3D system. So could you show us a bit more about that new Genoa 3D trimming system the boat has? You see it more and more these days. How does it work? Pros and cons. Is it better than the old Genoa car rails? Well, the 3D system is really interesting because it gives you more option on the sail trim of your head sail of your jib or Genoa. For me, on a race boat it makes sense. I'm not entirely sure it's interesting on a cruising boat, even though because it is first, what is it? You know, on the head sail on most boats you have a rail that goes forward and back, so you can adjust the shape of your head sail of your jib. So normally the track would be placed here and you can move it forward or back. Instead, on my boat I have 3D system, meaning that you have an inner, this yellow one, you have an outer, which is the green one that pulls this direction, and you have a downer, which is the black one under, that goes down. That's why 3D system. And then of course you have your sheet that make the clue goes back and forward and back. So it looks like this. See, I can have the Genoa more out, more in. I can play with the downer up and down, and then if I was going downwind I would want to have the clue more out, and I would use the green one to get it further out. This gives you more options in trimming your jib. It's more efficient, so it makes sense on a racing boat. I'm not sure that on cruising boat it makes much sense, just because you're not so into, you know, the exact perfect shape when you're cruising for your head sail. Eventually you'll have a furling sail that has not the perfect shape at the start anyway, so maybe it's not that interesting for a cruising boat. The pros of this system are lightweight, you don't have to drill skew your deck, and also more options. The cons, I don't see many cons actually of this system. It's quite robust, quite easy to do on any size of boat, using Dyneema and just purchase system and stuff like that. And actually one option I can see for cruising boat using it is in the case of a refit. So if your cruising boat is fitted with cars and they work properly, they don't leak, etc., just keep them. Maybe if you go into refit mode and you want to change things around your boat, or eventually your jib track leak a lot, maybe it's a good option to replace them with 3D, with a 3D system, which is only some friction ring and Dyneema, less chances of having leaks inside. So yeah, that's a bit my view on 3D trimming. Hope it answers your question.
Alright, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this first Q&A session about the Mini. I hope I've been able to answer your questions. If you have more questions, drop them in the comment section below. I'll try to do another one later in time. If you stayed so long into this video, you probably know the drill. Subscribe to the channel, give a like to the video, share it with your friend. Always give me a hand. And fair win and stay posted.